Hello everyone, and welcome back to one of our short studies in the book of Acts. This is really applicable to more than just the book of Acts, so whatever brought you here, welcome. We're going to talk about a Sabbath day's journey. How far were the Jews allowed to walk on the Sabbath day? This is one of the short studies to our larger verse-by-verse study of the book of Acts. So if you're interested in that, we just started it. It's the last video on my channel. You can jump in. And really, anytime in the future when you're watching this, that's going to be available to you. So check that out as well. You can download the handout that you're about to see on our website for free, 2BeLikeChrist.com. So let's talk about this. How far was a Jew, or in the Old Testament, one of the people of the nation of Israel, allowed to walk on the Sabbath day? Well, the Sabbath day, which was the seventh day of the week, or Saturday, it was a day that was set apart by God as special for rest among his people. And the Israelites weren't to perform any kind of unnecessary, quote, work on the Sabbath. Leviticus chapter 23, verse 3 reads, 6 days shall work be done, but on the seventh day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, a holy convocation. You shall do no work. It is a Sabbath to the Lord in all of your dwelling places. And God took the Sabbath very seriously. Although it isn't mentioned anywhere in the Old Testament, and it was never specified by God, the Jewish rabbis, or the religious teachers, enforced a walking restriction on the Sabbath. An individual was only allowed to walk a certain distance before the rabbis considered it work. This legislation or rabbinic tradition is referenced in Acts chapter 1, verse 12. After Jesus' ascension back to heaven, his apostles went from the Mount of Olives to the city of Jerusalem, and Luke records that they walked a Sabbath day's journey. So how far was too far? What was this restriction? Well, using verses like Exodus chapter 16, verse 29, and Numbers chapter 35, verse 4 and 5, the rabbis legislated that you could only walk 2,000 cubits away from your house on the Sabbath. So it's not a particularly far distance. And if you look at Acts chapter 1, verse 12, and look at the distance that the apostles traveled, maybe you pull it up on Google Maps or Google Earth, you'll see that the distance from the Mount of Olives to Jerusalem is right at about that 2,000 cubit mark. Josephus, who was a Jewish historian, he wrote that the Mount of Olives was 5 furlongs from Jerusalem. Okay, so that's a whole nother measurement. What is a furlong? A furlong was approximately 607 feet. It was the equivalent of the Roman stadia, the Roman stade or stadium. And if you do all the conversion and the math, you'll find that 5 furlongs equals about 3,035 feet, or 0.575 of a mile, which is almost exactly 2,000 cubits, or the Sabbath day's journey. So in conclusion, an average Jewish man or woman was allowed to walk about a kilometer or 0.6 of a mile away from their home on the Sabbath. And if the rabbis caught them walking further than that, well, they might be in trouble. However, I think it is really important to recognize here that this was a restriction, it was a tradition of the rabbis. This was nowhere legislated by God. And we know that a lot of the rabbis and the Pharisees, the Sadducees, those who ascribed to their traditions, were not always on Jesus' best side for enforcing some of these rules, because they were man-made rules. They weren't God's rules. They were based on good principles, but God nowhere gave these rabbis the right to enforce these on people and to make their lives maybe harder than they needed to be. So just keep that in mind as you think about this. So thank you everybody for tuning in. Again, if you want the handout, check it out down below in the description, and also our verse-by-verse study through the book of Acts. And there's notes, pages and pages of notes through those verses, also free on the website. All right, I'll see you guys next time.